happiness, but I think that we all here like to be successful and we are driven. So that's why those rules apply to you. So my first rule is find your vision and follow it. You see, I think it's the most important thing that we have a very clear vision of where we go. A goal, where do we go? Because you can have the best ship in the world. You can have the best cruise liner, but if the captain does not know where to go, that ship will drift around the world and out there at sea and will never end up anywhere. And this is exactly the way it is in real life. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have a vision, you just drift around. You're not going to be happy. This is why it is so important to have that vision. Now, I created that vision in Austria because I grew up after the Second World War. Austria, right along with Germany, lost the Second World War, thank God. And the problem was that everyone was so depressed because they lost the war that there was alcoholism everywhere. There was, of course, depression. There was a terrible economic situation. There was famine. There was starvation and all of those things. And also it was kind of a little place and narrow. I felt I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to escape. And I couldn't see myself really to work there and to stay there, to work in a factory, or to work on a farm, or to even to follow my father's footsteps and to become a police officer. I couldn't see that either. As a matter of fact, that's what my parents wanted me to do. They wanted me to become a police officer and to marry a girl by the name of Heidi and to have a bunch of children and to run around like the Von Trapp family in The Sound of Music. But that's not what I saw. This was the vision of my parents, but not mine. And luckily, one day in school, I watched a documentary about America. And I found myself, I knew exactly that is where I wanted to end up. I wanted to be in America. Now, my second rule is never ever think small. If you're going to accomplish anything, you have to think big. You have to go and shoot for the stars. The biggest challenge most people have is because they think small. And the reason why people think small and why they choose small little goals is because they're afraid to fail. They know that if you shoot for a big goal, then the chances of failing are very high. And they're afraid of failing. It's one of the most common things why people are frozen and why they can't make a move in life, because they're scared of failing. I say to myself, hey, I'm not worried about failing because that's part of life. You're not going to go and win everything. And how far can you fall? Look at this. This is the ground. That's as far as I can fall. And you know something? That the only time you really consider the failure is if you fall and you don't get up. But if you get up, you never consider the failure. So I never considered myself a failure. I always considered myself a winner, even though I fell every so often. But I always got up and I always moved forward. This is the important thing. I never had any patience, of course, for thinking small, because in German we have a saying, wenn schon, denn schon. And that means that if you do something, then go all out and do it well. And this was not just the case in bodybuilding. I didn't just want to be a bodybuilding champion. I wanted to be the greatest bodybuilder of all times. I wanted to have the most muscle, the most muscle of all times, the most definition. I wanted to win the most trophies, the most world championship titles. I just wanted to be the best. And the same is also in movies. I didn't just think about being in movies. No, I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to have above the title billing. I wanted to become the highest paid entertainer. I basically wanted to be another John Wayne. What's wrong with that? And then the same is in politics. I didn't just want to go and be in politics and enter a race for city council. I mean, let's be honest. Does that sound right, Schwarzenegger? City council? No, come on. Not even Schwarzenegger and mayor. No, it had to be Schwarzenegger running for governor. But not just any governor, but governor of the greatest state in the United States, of California. That was the important thing. I'll give you an example of thinking big. When I became governor, I wanted to rebuild California's ancient infrastructure. You see, America has been living off infrastructure that was built in the 50s and 60s, and it drives me absolutely insane that America hasn't started rebuilding that infrastructure. I mean, we haven't invested in new roads, or in new transit, or in schools, or in energy, or anything like that for decades. The number of cars that we have now in America are 4 times as many as we had in the 60s. So therefore, we should be having 4 times as many freeways, 4 times as many tunnels, 4 times as many bridges and all this. But we don't. So this is why I wanted to get our act together and do the upgrading, at least in California. So when I talk about infrastructure, I didn't really want to just fix roads and close some holes on the roads. I wanted to build massive freeways on top of freeways. I wanted to build the first high-speed rail in the United States. I wanted to build more bridges and more tunnels, more on-ramps and off-ramps. I wanted to see literally trains everywhere. Well, there was no excuse for Californians to get stuck in traffic, and there was no excuse really to send your kids in overcrowded classrooms in schools, and there was also no excuse that Los Angeles has a 100-year-old sewage system. That's shitty, I think. At first, of course, some of the legislators looked at me like I was absolutely insane when I told them this vision. They were willing to spend maybe $5 billion, which of course is petty cash in compared to what my vision was. But so some politicians, of course, had a hard time to see the big picture because they didn't really ever travel outside California. So they haven't really seen big infrastructure. They haven't really seen big infrastructure all over the United States, or maybe in Asia, in China, or in Korea, or in Brazil, or in European countries, or here in Australia maybe. So they haven't seen that. And then, of course, there are other politicians that simply don't have a vision of the future past the next election, which is a common problem politicians have all over the world. So it was my job as governor to motivate them and to take them and to see the traffic jams in Los Angeles and to see the overcrowded classrooms and to see all the problems that we have. And I kept pushing and pushing, and I pumped them up enough that eventually they saw the big picture. And eventually Democrats and Republicans came together, and we invested $60 billion to rebuild California's infrastructure, the biggest investment of our state in 50 years. So that's what we did because we had a big vision, and everyone bought in on this big vision. So remember, never think small, think big.